Jackson and I'm Deputy CEO of the Climate Institute, and I'm speaking to you from Cancun, the host of this year's UN Climate Change Summit. As 190 countries from around the world come to Cancun to discuss and build on the foundations that were laid at the Copenhagen Summit last year, the Climate Institute is releasing internal analysis from the Department of Climate Change which examines Australia's targets and compares those to the actions of other countries. When Australia set its target, it said that unconditionally, regardless of what anyone else would do, it would reduce its emissions by 5% below 2000 levels by 2020. This was agreed by both the government and the opposition. However, what they also said is that depending on the actions of other countries, that Australia would move to a 15 or even 25% reduction on 2000 levels by 2020. And what this internal analysis from the department shows is that if one looks at the conditions that were set to move into those higher targets, then Australia needs to build into its policy flexibility at a domestic level the ability to move to the upper end of its target range. For example, the actions and the targets that have been committed to by major developing countries like China, India, Brazil and South Africa meet the conditions for Australia to move to a 15% target. If you look at the actions of other advanced economies like the United States, Japan, New Zealand and the EU, then Australia would be looking to have a target based on the government's conditions of between a 10 and a 20% reduction on 2000 levels by 2020. What the analysis also highlights is that China's target in particular is quite ambitious, and it would contribute to and is consistent with the conditions that the government set to moving towards its 25% target on 2000 levels by 2020. What's also clear from the analysis is that the government, as it moved into Copenhagen, used its diplomats and engaged with its ministers and with ministers from other countries to attempt to increase the level of ambition of Japan, Russia, New Zealand and all the other countries that engaged within the lead up to Copenhagen so that the conditions for the upper end of its target range would be met. And at its heart, the reason the government was doing that is that it recognised that as a country which is very vulnerable to the impacts from climate change, as we've seen from recent droughts, fires and floods, that it is in our national interest to ensure strong action at a global level, which ultimately means strong action at a domestic level. So all of this underpins the fact that as we move forward and have discussions in Cancun, but also importantly as the multi-party Committee on Climate Change discusses our carbon or pollution pricing mechanism back at home, that we have to maintain the flexibility to move to the upper end of our target range, because as the department's analysis shows, that if we were even to play our fair share to the inadequate global response we currently have, then we would have a target of between 10 and 15%. And if we want a target which is consistent with Australia's national interests of avoiding the worst impacts of accelerating climate change, then we would need to have the ability to meet a 25% target by 2020.